Hello and welcome to Red Red. Today I'm talking about two books, the collections of short stories by the great modern sci-fi author Ted Chiang. These books are both kind of outstanding for me, and I really, really love Ted Chiang's style. One of the reasons I kind of did this in one video as opposed to breaking it up was because I was kind of skimming through the books, trying to decide which book I liked best, and really I just can't help but think they need to be both bought and both read. Yes, Stories of Your Life and Others has the kind of titular story, which you probably found out about because you watched Arrival and then you heard that, oh yeah, it was adapted from this. And I do want to talk about that, but some other really outstanding stories in this, being The Tower of Babylon, the opening story. There's also Understand, 72 Letters, and really the last two are the big ones. There's Hell is the Absence of God and Liking What You See. However, despite having some really amazing stories in this one, when I picked up Exhalation to read, I feel like it didn't have the most didn't have as bombastic a start as Tower of Babylon, but it does start really well with The Merchant at the Alchemist's Gate. It has Exhalation, a kind of funny short 3-page story, What's Expected of Us, the life cycle of software objects, and then some really, really good ones. So the life cycle of software object is one of those good ones. The Truth of Fact, the Truth of Feeling, Omphalos, and Anxiety is the Dizziness of Freedom. Really, yeah, I'm going to get into it. I don't want to do sort of like just plot summary stuff. I want to talk about how I feel about the stories and some of the themes and ideas. So just trust me when I say these books are absolutely more than worth your time. I'll start with Stories of Your Life and I'll start with the titular story, actually, because one of the interesting things that Ted Chiang explores, I think he pretty explicitly explored in this, but he almost felt like he had to make himself clear with Merchant at the Alchemist's Gate and that funny short story, what we're compelled to do, what's expected of us. Ted Chiang talks about how there's sort of two different ways that you can approach a time travel story, and there's the ones that have sort of open loops where if you make a decision it kind of splits off into alternate timelines, and then he has one with closed loops, and he kind of stresses quite a lot that if it's a closed loop, then there is no free will, and he makes this point just absolutely perfectly in The Merchant at the Alchemist's Gate, which really quick sort of cold opening description. This merchant walks up, or this buyer, this like dude basically walks up to this merchant and sees this interesting little sort of like basically imagine like a Harry Potter Quidditch goal, and the merchant says, everything that goes in the right side will come out the left side 5 seconds later. And so he kind of sticks his hand in the right side, and nothing comes out of the left side. So it's sort of just like that. And then he pulls his hand out, and 5 seconds later, a random hand comes out. And it's like, oh, it's this really amazing thing. And then pretty much what happens is a random hand comes out that same side, and the buyer, the dude, is just like, what the hell? And he was like, you'll see. And then 5 seconds later, the merchant has to walk around and stick his hand through. It's not even a choice. And so I think that's why this story makes that really, really clear. And in an interview or podcast, Ted Chiang was talking very specifically about how he wanted to make a meaningful or impactful story with a closed time loop. He might have even just mentioned it in the kind of accompanying story notes that are at the end, which are usually very short and not kind of boring, just like, oh, this is what I was thinking, this is where I was when I was writing it. But he makes the same point in Story of Your Life, where compared to the movie Arrival, the main characters has a similar thing where as she's sort of learning the heptapod's language, she's starting to perceive time kind of all at once, sort of in a Kurt Vonnegut sort of House 5 style. And it's becoming progressively kind of she's becoming aware of, just like we're becoming aware of, that because you can see everything laid out, it means that it's all predetermined and you can't make any really meaningful or impactful choices because the concept of making a choice doesn't exist. And that was the big deviation that the movie made, much to some people's sort of more simple, easier comprehension, is sort of like, if you could see everything in your life, would you still make those same choices? And I think the movie's still really good, and it kind of says like, okay, spoilers for the movie as well. I think I've done an alright job in not spoiling the movie, but basically the movie starts with the kind of cold open of her daughter dying of what seems like cancer, and then she decides that even though her daughter's going to die, she makes the choice to have a baby and live through that because life is precious and worth living and all that stuff, which is sort of like using the kind of old terms, like changing this story from a tragedy to a comedy, because in this story the daughter dies at like the age of 28 in a hiking accident, and I remember watching this sort of the screenwriter say that didn't work for him because you could always just call and tell her to not go, but you just totally miss the point because because the future exists, you can't tell. You're compelled to just let everything play out. It's even more effective, even more tragic. Sorry, that same loud ass truck that from the edited intro is back. It's even more effective because he couldn't change, or because she couldn't stop or affect such a trivial death. So, yeah, and it's kind of. I'm deciding whether to talk about Blade Runner because I don't think I'll talk about it in any other point. I'm not really feeling making a video on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but this is sort of like 2 for 2, where Denis Villeneuve, probably not him, but the screenwriters at least, sort of took the concepts from the original. I'm talking about Blade Runner 2049 or something, 46. I don't know why I'm blanking on it. Compared to the original, where and they just sort of flip the meaning or the subtext. So in the original Blade Runner, the whole thing with Roy Batty is that, they are slaves. They're kind of built in their slaves, and like the humans put in these arbitrary 4-year life limits, and the robots are trying to transcend this because they're like, we're real, we're feeling people. You kind of have no right to treat us this way, and it's this. It culminates in this sort of great thing where. Roy Batty saves Harrison Ford from like fucking falling off a building, and oh my god, the Tears in Rain monologue, which is just so tear-inducing. I need to stop talking about it. The second movie kind of flips the switch and says, no, robots weren't important, but now that they've been able to give birth, now that they've produced like a human, now we can treat them like they're humans, which to me, as you can tell, I don't really like the movie that much, the story at least, to me was just so against the point, because we already learned from the first movie that them just being conscious and sentient and feeling and loving was what made life worthwhile. Anyway, that's my Blade Runner 2 tangent. Yeah, so 2 for 2, and I was really worried about Dune, but I feel like Dune's going alright, but a lot of the big stuff in Dune's happening in the second part, so I guess we'll wait and see what next year's Dune is like. Skipping forward, 72 Letters is a story that I kind of feel like I don't understand as well as I ought to, and it's probably due for a reread soon. I remember the story. It's got this sort of this great kind of comparison, and this is something that I feel like I really need to study with Ted Chiang, because he did this super well in The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling, which is having sort of two parallel storylines, or in that case, it was two parallel storylines. In this, it's sort of two parallel concepts. The first concept is that there are these sort of tulpas that are able to be made, or golems, I guess, using kind of 72-letter Hebrew like phrases or whatnot, and so you're able to kind of create this like create life, essentially. It's pretty archaic and it's pretty early days, but it's got a cool kind of catch or twist in that they are like in that they are golems and not AI. But the alternative, the really just like thing, is that the reason the main character who's making these tulpas gets sort of introduced or becomes important in the story is that these people essentially realize that they take some humans and they like extract out sperm cell and egg and then extract down or whatever, and essentially find out we've only got like 5 more iterations, 5 or 6 left, and then that's it. There are no more eggs will be made, no more sperm will be generated, and so they're in this sort of like, how do we kind of start to create life, because we know like we're like the only people in the world, just this super underground society, we're the only people who know that this is happening. And that is such a cool thing that, like, honestly, I feel like it maybe didn't it didn't click to me how deep it is, and so I do want to give it another read. But talking about the parallel storylines, I'll lead into the Truth of Fact, Truth of Feeling from Exhalation, where gosh, this is just such a fucking genius idea. He takes the Black Mirror sort of concept, where there's this episode of Black Mirror from early on in the first season, where people kind of start to get cameras in their eyes, and it's this whole sort of like, oh yeah, you know, we start to kind of film and record, and we become addicted to kind of watching our own life, which Ted Chiang also does even better in this story, and I'll get to that. And I think in the show, it's been so long since I watched it, but it kind of just culminates in this guy being sad because his wife cheated on him or whatever. Which is sad, but it's kind of not the most interesting use of that technology. In The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling, it has 2 parallel stories. Again, this is such a it's such a clear indication of Ted Chiang's writing, and I really, if I kind of get into writing stories, this is something I'm going to study, because I think that he makes these parallel storylines complement each other so well. The first storyline is one of the things that I'm talking about, one of the Black Mirror sort of things. People are slowly starting to get introduced to this technology that you can kind of go back and replay your memories and check if you were correct, see who was right objectively in a conversation. The parallel storyline is I don't know if it specified the religion, but it's sort of a group of missionaries going to a tribe of indigenous people, trying to spread the good word. And he gets to this missionary basically finds out that, hey, they don't write anything; everything is oral or verbal. And in the indigenous peoples, there's one kid who kind of like becomes friendly with the missionary, and he uses him as a sort of go-between. But as the story progresses, the fascinating thing is that in the indigenous tribes, they're trying to decipher or trying to choose how to like fairly separate. Or how to fairly say, you get this, like be democratic about the division of assets and goods. And one of the owners says, family A gets this because they did X in the past, and family B gets this because they did Y in the past. And at this point, at the end of the story, the missionary's been there so long that he's like, oh, okay, let me just go fact check that. And he goes back and essentially realizes that family A did Y and family B did X. And he tries to go and say to the kid, you're wrong. I've got the data right here. I know for sure you need to do this. But the kid says, we're talking about, there are two different truths. There is the truth of fact, and then there's the truth of feeling. And basically the head of the tribe knows so much more than just those details that he's sort of willing to objectively lie, because surveying the area or surveying all of the details and thinking about them as people and thinking about what they're going to be like, thinking about what they're going to do as opposed to just what they've done or what they're doing, it's the more true decision to lie factually but to truth feelingly. And the missionary just has, he's unable to kind of believe this or buy this. But genius, poof, explosion moment. Back in main story, Ted Chiang reveals that this is what we do with our memory all the time. We always change our memories to craft scenarios in which we are better. The frame story, the way that he kind of explores this in the book, is that this dad was absolutely sure that his relationship with his daughter was ruined because of something his daughter said, but actually just mouth to mouth verbatim, it was something he said to her, something along the lines of like you're the reason mum left, and you can see why that would cause some animosity. But the dad had essentially completely reconstructed in his head that it was the daughter who said that, and that he was being so noble for forgiving her despite saying such a terrible thing. But she knows and she remembers in her version of the story that no, it was you who said that to me, and I was just being polite to you the whole time. And they essentially fact check it with the data, and she was right. He was the one who said it. And it's just a really such a genius way of merging two storylines, and not in the sort of Hell is the Absence of God merging storylines, because Hell is the Absence of God is plot setting. It's a universe where angels, gods, heaven, hell are objectively real. Angels show up all the time, just chill out, and they're like, hey, yeah. And heaven isn't really anything special. Hell isn't anything special. It's just believers go to heaven, non-believers go to hell. And hell is not like fire or anything. Apparently, he talks about how you can see hell at certain parts, and it's just people chilling, very sort of first layer of Dante's Inferno, where Socrates is just hanging out with his mates. But the framing and the multiple characters in this story are essentially one character who's or they're all grouped around one particular angel coming and visiting. This angel just pops down, fire and explosions and all of this stuff. Character one is with his wife, and his wife dies when the angel lands because glass explodes and she just dies. Character one and his wife both thought they were going to hell. They were non-believers, but she dies and he saw her go to heaven, and so character one is now oh fuck, I need to become a believer before I die, which is crazy in its own right. Character 2 is a motivational speaker who was born without her legs, but became a sort of motivational speaker. And in this character, and in this angel coming, she just woke up one day and had legs again, which is another. And the last character, which is a bit more subtle but still very important, is a character who has been looking for a meaningful experience, and the angel comes and he still doesn't feel it. So all of these characters' stories get intertwined, and I find that Ted Chiang's got a really great voice in terms of rendering the characters. He's not. It's funny. I don't know how like Borges he is, because he definitely has the unique kind of concepts, and he doesn't fall into the Chekhovian slice of life kind of approach to writing a short story, but he's definitely got fleshed out characters, and it's not like he's writing, the 5-page summaries of an imaginary 500 page book that he also would have written in sort of like Borges talks about. Ted Chiang's definitely, I think he's found a great balance, but with a little more like 60-40 Borges Chekhov. And liking what you see it's cool because it's a documentary style. It's sort of in light of a lot of sort of equality issues and concepts that have been showing up in universities in, like, let's say more prominently in the last decade. This is a documentary talking about a procedure that you can go to that makes you unable to see beauty. You see the physical concepts, but you don't attach them with any sort of hierarchy or any like beauty status. And it's just a sort of interview of this student body who's sort of pushing for it to be mandatory, and the kind of pros and cons in between. And I really liked that Ted Chiang, I think I'm just confirming, is that he would give it a try. He would change his brain to not see beauty, which I thought was an interesting, it was kind of funny because he'd almost he'd set up interesting points for both sides, but then just sort of says, oh yeah, on a kind of adjacent subjective note, I would do this, which is kind of funny if you just read the story notes. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about in Stories of Your Life. I do want to jump over. I've jumped a little bit over. Tower of Babylon is sort of so good, I don't want to say anything, just on the off chance that you haven't read the book, which I still think most people who are watching these videos have read the book anyway. The story that I sort of missed, or the two stories that I want to talk about, are The Life Cycle of Software Objects, which is probably Ted Chiang's longest story in general. It's over 100 pages, and holy shit, I gotta take a moment to let this story re-sink back in. But as this great coincidence, I couldn't believe I came across this. A friend of mine told me about the Very Bad Wizards podcast, and although it's good, it's sort of they've been going on for so long that there's no way I'm going to catch up, and I kind of get bored in the first segment anyway. I found an episode where they were talking to Ted Chiang about the video game Soma, which I absolutely love that game so much, and this was just like a literal mouth drop open moment where I was like, oh my god, I'm going to see something awesome. And that podcast is really good. A key phrase that I got out of that he really explored kind of explicitly in The Life Cycle of Software Objects is that we are going to hurt AI much earlier than AI is going to hurt us. And The Life Cycle of Software Objects is essentially the story of, think of sort of like Tamagotchi, kind of a boomer saying that, but think of sort of like the old pets and animals that you were able to create and take care of, like virtual Neopets, etc. But imagine that they've given them really rudimentary AI that is able to learn and evolve and develop. And at first they were actually made in the body of animals. They were like a little lion that could talk and say like, "Oh, I love you, mom," and all that, like all this dumb stuff. But then they're just like, "Hey, what if we just put it in a human body?" And so they essentially start to make like young AI that's able to progress as humans. And there are so many, this is a story that Ted Chiang really kind of he took super seriously the concept of how would all different spectrums, the whole spectrum of humanity treat digital children. And there are some interesting things. I don't know if he was meaning to do this. I don't even know if he did do this, and this is maybe just me projecting. I did get the feeling that the level of intelligence was similar to kind of high functioning autism or Asperger's, but that's just me. I don't know it. Like, he never mentions that in the story or in the notes or anything. But there is such a, he talks about people who get their kids and then their kids say something and so they rewind, because you can do that with AI. You can just go back to previous like kind of save files, but then they realize that they could just shout at their kid and get angry at them and physically hit them and abuse them, and then just rewind and they wouldn't remember. And then these people being just like, hey, but then they also realize that it didn't have to be that. If like their kid got upset, they could just pause and rewind. And these people who designed the AI, they're just like, what are you doing? You need to like let them grow organically. And and really kind of sick and twisted stuff starts potentially happening to the kids. People figure out how to bypass like the pain nullifier, and then oh my gosh, really one of the bigger things is that the model of the kids gets outdated. So they sort of like, there's a new standardized operating system, and the kids that they had originally made can only function on this lower one. So they're just basically alone in this desert, kind of deserted playground. And they need to make the decision of, do we update their software and expose them to the big world? Which, oh man, for someone who honestly doesn't have kids, it's honestly so Ted Chiang being the person who doesn't have kids, it's so stupendously written. It's I don't know, is that the right word? Stupendous. I'm meaning it as a compliment anyway. Just kind of looking for some synonyms, Oh, sorry, I just popped into my head. I'm reading Infinite Jest right now, and there's the section where one of the sport commentators is like trying to figure out synonyms for beat and got beaten by, and he just comes up with all of this funny stuff. Wow. Life cycle of software objects. If I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's popped into my head, but that's pretty much it for the story. But I think that might be Ted Chiang kind of fleshing out a story as long as like the longest that he fleshes out a story, because there really is a lot to say. And anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, which I think comes from Kierkegaard, right? That's one of his things, or is it Heidegger? I think Kierkegaard. So this is like one of those genius elevator pitches that's like, yes, there's craft, but sometimes you get an elevator pitch or a hook that is just so good, you like the story almost writes itself. And Anxiety is the Dizziness of Freedom is probably that, because the premise is there's a little box, a little triangle screen that has a light go off when a critical moment in your life happens. So, for example, you're waking up, you're like, am I going to go out to this gig, or am I going to go and buy this thing? Or am I not? I'm going to not. Bing, an alternate universe exists in which you did buy it, or you did go to that gig, and you can text or write messages to that version of you, because in their timeline, ding, there was a universe where you didn't buy it, of course. Eventually, the technology of this prism becomes so good that you can see videos of it. And the elevator pitch is people become addicted and go to essentially the equivalent of AA meetings. They become addicted to seeing better versions of their life, in which they made the smarter choices. And just let that sink in for a second of how amazing of a concept that is. And how good of an elevator pitch for a story. But Ted Chiang, he again takes it seriously. He fleshes out a couple of things, and the whole big thing is that there are some storylines in which loved ones are still alive, and people are trying to sort of find that. But I did like that Ted Chiang sort of, despite kind of being a bit annoyed at the whole like open timelines, because anything can happen, he is still able to write a good kind of time travel story in which alternate timelines exist, and they are meaningful and impactful. So he's really demonstrated his sort of virtuosity in understanding both forms of time travel. Again, I talked about this in the Dune video, but I really like how Herbert sort of treated time travel in that there are many sort of parallel timelines and choices that you can make, but some timelines have a really strong gravity, and so because of the choices you made back then, or because of how important this thing is, like many choices end up leading to that timeline. That's another just cool perspective. I just thought about it because I said only two, but I'm sure there are others, and I'm not that well read in sci-fi, so maybe there are more perspectives on time travel. Nevertheless, I think I've talked about Ted Chiang for enough time. I really love Ted Chiang. Both of these books are solid 5 stars, and I hope he's still writing. I haven't read any like additional things outside of what he's written for these 2 stories. Maybe I'm kind of just hoping that he gets another short story collection made, and I'll buy that in a moment. But yeah, thanks again for watching. Let me know if there are other authors in a similar vein to Ted Chiang that you recommend, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.